So at the end of chapter 4, this is where they're waiting for Miss Pointy to arrive. Sarah's really nervous because she's repeating 5th grade. She doesn't know the type of teacher that she's going to get. We know how that story goes. She ends up getting Miss Pointy. But here's Sahara's thoughts. She says, that's when I noticed it is so quiet we can hear her coming down the hall. We're not even blinking, frozen like statues in our first impression poses. What's in her file, I wonder? And then I can't help snickering a little, even though it breaks my pose, because if they kept files on grown-ups, it would be a different story, wouldn't it? And I like that thinking. Sahara, as a kid, is thinking, like, what's in Miss Pointy's file? She doesn't know Miss Pointy yet. And boy, all those things, like from the way this school year is gone, I wonder what are some things that are in Miss Pointy's files. We tend to, I don't want to say judge. No, when Sahara gets her file from Miss Pointy, it's a big moment. And I think it connects back to the beginning of that story where she has that thought, like, it would be a different story if we kept files on grown-ups. Because sometimes, even as teachers, we tend to get paperwork that says, this student did this. And then we form all kinds of judgments based on that. I got really frustrated as a kid going through that because I wasn't the best test taker. And I was like, I'm more than just a test. And some of you can relate to that. I love hearing the celebrations we heard today for people like Callie Ann who did really well on the math test. And I like to be able to celebrate that stuff. And I like to highlight and say, hey, you killed it. You did a great job. I love those celebrations. But there's another side to that. What about all those people that didn't do well on that test? What are we doing with that information? And what does that mean for you if you didn't do well on that test? And for some of you, you take that really personally because you're like, but maybe I had a bad day. Maybe I didn't get enough to eat. Maybe my parents got in an argument before I left. Maybe I was yelled at by my parents while I was getting out of the car. Maybe something happened to a family member or a family pet the day that you took the test. There's so many things that affect that test. And when you look at it on paper, it's like, but so-and-so got this score on that test. And that's put in their file. Things would be different if kids could have a chance to peek into what a teacher's file or another adult or parent's file might say. Chapter 13 is called Autobiographia Literaria. I ran into my room at home and I closed the door. I couldn't wait. I spilled the envelope out onto my bed. On top was a page ripped out of my journal that I had forgotten about. Do teachers have secrets? Miss Pointy responded, yes. For instance, I like to give kids presents sometimes on the sly if I know what they really want. That's a good secret. Teachers' bad secrets like getting caught smoking in the custodian's office or being fresh to the principal or having boyfriends that ride motorcycles, those are kept in a dreadful file somewhere. It's hard to get a teacher's file. But students' files are so easy to get your hands on. I have some questions for Miss Pointy after all of that. Next in the file was a letter from my mom. I request my daughter to be removed from special education program. I request my daughter to be removed from the special ed program. I smiled and I turned the letter over. And then there were the letters that I had written. Dear Daddy, I miss you. Dear Daddy, when are you coming home? Dear Daddy, why didn't you take me with you? Dear Daddy, it was my birthday. I wished it on my candles that you would call and you didn't. Dear Daddy, Mom says you don't help with anything anymore, but I don't care. I know you'll come back and help us. Dear Daddy, there's a hole in my heart. I turned them over one by one like cards in a fortune teller's deck. But these weren't telling me the future. These were telling me the past. It was sad to see them, but it was funny too that they had kept them, even though as I leafed through them, I realized they all said the same thing. They all told the same story. Miss Pointy says the main character is the one who changes. I held one of the letters I had written in 3rd grade up to the light from the window. I couldn't help smiling at my round, careful cursive. Dear Daddy, can't you see my handwriting? Can't you see from my handwriting what kind of girl I am? Will that make it enough for you to come home to me? Clouds outside were high and generous big, moving fast. I opened the window. I closed my eyes and I held out the piece of paper and I let it flutter in my open palms. And when I opened my palm, I saw it flap. When I opened my eyes, I saw it flapping in the sky like a bird flying away. I tossed out the next letter and the next, making birds until the last one. As I watched them tumbling past the brown brick of the buildings east to the lake, I wrote one last letter in my mind's eye. Dear Daddy, I love you. I miss you. I hope someday you're smart enough to be sorry, but if you're not, that's okay. I'm smart enough not to keep all this in my file. Love, your daughter and secret writer, Sahara Jones, now and forever. In my mind's eye, I ripped it in half. In my mind's eye, I let the pieces loose. I let them climb the stairway of the wind, past the buildings, past the lake, past the moon and the stars and the sun, to somewhere else, to the place where my father now lives. And then I pulled out my notebook and I wrote and I wrote and I wrote. Not about my heart-wrenching life story, but all of these pages about a teacher and her amazing adventures with her class. All about a teacher's file and a teacher's secrets. I wrote about friends and tattletales, bravery and fear, but for the first time, it didn't all have to be straight true. I could write about all the exciting things I wished were true. The words moved like wheels across paper. I didn't count pages or minutes. Mom tapped on my door, and only then did I notice that the sun had gone down and that I was writing nearly in the dark. The whole apartment was warm. The radiators clanged like music. I could smell meatloaf in the oven. Mom had fried potatoes with lots of onions and butter. She was making my favorite meal for dinner. Where had I been? Did you catch it?
Sleep.
Let me read it again. Not about my heart-wrenching life story, but all of these pages about a teacher and her amazing adventures with her class. These pages. Like,
she wrote that book.
These pages.
She was writing a book.
You've been sitting in here forever. My mother flicked on the light switch and squinted at me. Had I? It was like magic. Like Rip Van Winkle, who fell asleep and found himself 100 years older when he opened his eyes. I unfurled my fingers, fossilized and aching around the pen. Dinner's on. I'm almost finished. What you writing now? She asked. Sketching out some adventures, I confessed. I've already finished my Autobiographia Literaria. In 1 second, I was embarrassed that I was so eager. Mom's eyes were laughing at me. Who now? My life story. I've had a very interesting life, I said, defending myself. Me too. Her eyes were glinting. Fascinating. And it's over? I ignored her. I'm starting something new. Maybe you'll show me sometime. If you want, I said. It'll be in the library. I felt her bristle. Did she think I was being fresh? I turned in my chair to correct myself, to explain that it was promised to the library, behind section 940. To be found by someone in the future, someone whose life will be made more exciting just by reading my heart-wrenching life story and amazing adventures. But the doorway was already empty. While we ate, I could hear the silverware against the plates. It's good, Mom. I complimented her, and she smiled. She smiled back. She looked at me for a long time. It made me nervous. So I just looked at my meatloaf. By the way, tonight or the next time your mom or dad make dinner for you and you're eating it, even if it's not the best thing you've ever eaten, you should say, hey, thanks for making dinner. That was really good. And I bet your parents will probably smile too. Because believe it or not, those small little compliments can mean the world to your parents. So, what'd you do at school today? I shrugged. Yeah, kids read aloud from their journals. Huh, Lord. They sure waste your time at school, don't they, said Mom. Just writing and talking about any old thing that pops into your head. I bet them kids in the suburbs learning calculus by now. She didn't know what to say next, I could tell. You're growing up, is what she finally came out with. How do you know? I teased. Because you're not talking to me, she smiled sadly. I talk to you. I filled my mouth with potatoes. I guess I don't know how to speak your language. I laughed a little, like she had made a joke, like we were talking about why firemen wear red suspenders, or what time is it when an elephant sits on your fence, and She laughed too. Anybody know what time it is when an elephant sits on your fence?
Time to get a new fence.
Time to get a new fence. I still don't know the joke about the firefighters and the red suspenders, though. But that night, I climbed into bed with her, and she didn't say anything against it. She held me firm with one arm around my shoulder like she didn't want me to go anywhere. I stared at the ceiling and felt uneasy and excited at once. Like I was destined to end up somewhere else anyway, no matter how she held me. Sing to me, she said, half joking. Tell me a story. Tell me your autobiography or whatever. I took a breath. I thought about what poem to spend. I spoke to her softly like I was singing a lullaby. When I was a child, I played with myself in the corner of the schoolyard all alone. I hated dolls and I hated games. Animals were not friendly and birds flew away. If anyone was looking for me, I hid behind a tree and I cried out, I am an orphan. And here I am, the center of all beauty, writing these poems. Imagine. Imagine, I thought. She gently stroked my hair, making sure I was there. It was comforting, but now I didn't need it. It was extra credit. Esme Regie Cadell is an avid collector of sparkly stickers and a pretty good roller skater. She's also the author of Educating Esme, a Diary of a Teacher's First Year, which won an Alex Award given for the best adult books for young adults. She's worked as a children's bookseller, teacher, and school librarian, and now runs the popular children's literature website, planetesme.com. Esme lives in Chicago with her husband and son. The end. Yay!